Go Dogs, that's right. Well, good morning, faith and freedom. Welcome to Washington, D.C. I'm so excited you're here because, as I told a group last night, when I got off the plane, I actually felt this overwhelming presence of common sense, something that we normally don't get here. And it's because you're here. You're bringing the common sense of everyday Americans to Washington, D.C. Look, most people know that I've been leading an investigation into what really happened on January 6th. And people ask, why is that important? It's because it's important that America people know the truth of what really happened. There's too often that we just buy into what the mainstream media tries to present to us, which they have an agenda. And as we've seen, the select committee had a political agenda. But to get to justice, we have to know the truth. And we're pursuing that, and we're uncovering it. As we bring evidence, we're going to bring it to you. But let me tell you, it's one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. Documents have been destroyed that we've had to search and find. They've been sent to other agencies who are not working with us, and even fighting within the House to get the resources we need. Thank God that Speaker Mike Johnson has provided us everything that I've requested to get our job done. But there are times that it's just so frustrating. We even question ourselves, what good are we doing? But as I was thinking about this the other day, I remembered something that happened to me in my past. You see, there's times that God will put us in places to give us a moment that we can reflect back upon when times get rough, when things get hard. Because he tells us in the book of Romans that tribulations will come our way, and we should take joy in those tribulations, take glory in them, because they're teaching us. They're teaching us patience and perseverance, to where when something harder comes along, we'll know God took us through that, so he'll take us through this. In 1986, I was stationed in the Air Force at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. It's co-located with Pearl Harbor. In fact, my wife and I lived right across the fence from Pearl Harbor. Now, my dad is a World War II veteran. He was in the Army, landed at D-Day, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and on into Germany. And as a medic, you know, he saw the worst of humanity. But he always kept his faith. He loved this country, and he taught me to love this country. He loved God. He taught me to not only love God, but trust God. Trust God with all my heart and lean not unto my own understanding. But sometimes it's hard. We look at the circumstances around us and we're like, Lord, how can I do this? There's too many circumstances. But he wants us to keep our eye on the goal, on our mission, on our vision. Well, it was 1986. It was December the 7th. And if you know history, then that was the anniversary, the 45th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was actually on a Sunday the attack took place, and on this anniversary was a Sunday as well. So the base was mostly closed except for mission essential personnel. I was working in intelligence and communications, so I was on duty that day as a young airman, lower rank. We got the weekend duty. But I took a lunch break and I walked to a sandwich shop, which took me right by the base flagpole. And as I was walking to go grab a bite of lunch, I looked and there was this one older gentleman, which now for a flatback is probably about the age I am now. So he was really young. But he was wearing a Pearl Harbor survivor's cap. But he was standing by himself by that flagpole. And I walked up to him and I just engaged in conversation. I said, hey, thank you for your service. And we started talking. And ironically, he was in the building of which was the duty station I had. I worked in that building, and that building still had the pock marks from Japanese fighters strafing the building. We also know that that was a barracks during the time, and most of the airmen were in the cafeteria eating when a bomb was dropped right outside, and it killed many young airmen who didn't even know what was going on. He was in that building at that time. And as he was standing there talking to me, and I'm thinking, we have a connection here. He was Army Air Corps, I'm Air Force. We were basically doing the same type of job. He was working in communications and intelligence, and he was in the same building I worked in at that historic moment. But then his whole attitude changed. Tears started flowing down his face, and he said, I can hear them. And I looked at him, and he said, I can hear them screaming right now. and I can smell their flesh burning. And he just stood there mesmerized. I just stood quietly praying for him as he recounted the events of that day and talking about his friends who were brutally slaughtered that day in a surprise attack, an act of war. As he was talking, the flag has this metal buckle that holds the rope to the flag. And the whole time he's talking, I'm standing there and the wind is blowing the flag, and that metal buckle is hitting that flagpole. And it's making this ding, ding, ding. And as he's speaking, I'm listening to that sound. And when he gets done, he starts telling me, even through all the struggle that he had through his life, as we call PTS today, he was shell-shocked then. He never lost the memory or the feeling or the horror of that day. But he looked at me and he said, as he pointed to the flag, he said, I did it for freedom. I did it for freedom, and I would do it all again. As I stood there, I realized every obstacle in the world faced them that day. We were not engaged in war with anyone. We were a peaceful nation. Our Pacific Fleet was slaughtered. That was the purpose of the attack, to totally destroy our ability to fight back. But the result of that, it enraged the American people. And as the Japanese admiral said, I fear that we have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. Now, it wasn't the motion that changed things. Yes, we were still unprepared for war. But the American people stood up, and my dad was one of those who volunteered to serve in the Army, to fight against the oppressiveness and the tyranny of oppressive nations that were trying to steal our freedom. To this day, if I hear that sound, and unfortunately a lot of those metal buckles have been replaced with plastic, but occasionally you'll hear that sound, and I say, that's my sound of freedom. And it will remind me of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because something else my dad told me, doing what is right, it's not easy, and it's rarely popular, but it is always the right thing to do. When my tour of duty in Hawaii ended, I was sent to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. And I worked still in communications and intelligence, which most of our work was below ground in the basement of the headquarters building, but I had an administrative office up top that I would work out of sometime. And it was just a few hundred yards away from the main runway, and this is during the Cold War, where we're intercepting Soviet bombers on a daily basis. And when the F-15s would get alerted, they would go screaming down the runway, full afterburners. If you were on the phone, you had to stop your conversation. And most everybody would just stop, and once they went by, they would say, that's the sound of freedom, and continue on with their conversation. What I want to leave with you is we all have a sound of freedom. Whether it's children singing, as was portrayed in the movie Sound of Freedom, that came out recently. Or it's the sound of a fighter jet. Or maybe it's the first few bars of the national anthem. Or maybe it's a buckle hitting a flagpole. That sound is to remind us that there is something greater than us that we're fighting for, and it's for the next generation. And whenever things get tough, whenever I'm fighting against a huge bureaucracy to get to the truth, I think of that flagpole, and I realize that what we're doing here today and what I'm doing in Congress is for exactly what that Pearl Harbor survivor said. It's for those stars and stripes, and it's for freedom. Thank you for what you do. God bless you. God bless America, and God bless faith and freedom.